guest many times on various talk radio shows. He's done so many things for the country and the conservative side of the Republican Party, and that makes for a super long list. His bio, I think, on our first time we had, excuse me, that we had him was super long. I've known Steve for quite a while, and I've always admired him. He's a great wealth of knowledge. So I'm really glad he was able to help join our meeting today. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve Frank.
Tony, thank you very much for introducing me. I always enjoy talking to the Tea Party. It's important for us to have activists who are knowledgeable and who are trained activists in the cause of freedom. And sadly, at times our Republican Party is not doing that. It says my speaker is not working. Can you all hear me?
You're breaking up.
No, we're not hearing you.
Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. As I was saying, it's important that we have a activist, grassroots volunteer corps that is ready, willing, and able to promote our conservative principles of freedom. And in these times, when we've had a massive Russian collusion, delusion hoax, the Ukrainian corruption by Joe Biden, but they try to impeach the president. We have the riots in our streets, yet our churches are closed down. These are very trying times for all of us. So let me give you an overview of where we are, first with the state budget, so you understand what's going to happen Monday night, just 2 days from now, in Sacramento. Under the state law, the legislature has to pass a budget by midnight, June 15th. That's in the state constitution. It doesn't mean that the budget has to be accurate or final. They just have to pass something that's called a budget. And so at the moment, the governor's budget is $54 billion in deficit. And that's what you'll read about in the San Bernardino Sun, in the LA Times, and both papers and all the media that claims the budget deficit is 54 billion are lying to us. The actual deficit at a minimum is 68 billion, and the difference is $14 billion. What the governor has done to make it a $54 billion deficit is he has taken $14 billion from the federal government that he has requested, claimed that it's already going to come to us, and he's using the $14 billion as a balance of the budget. Interestingly enough, the Legislative Analyst's Office is opposed to that, the way he put it in the budget, because unlike any other budget item, any other source of revenue, based on the governor's budget, the $14 billion cannot be spent by the legislature. It can only be spent by him. So in other words, he has set himself up for a $14 billion slush fund for his special interest. More importantly, the president has made it clear that there's not going to be $14 billion for California. There won't be another dime for California because we violate numerous federal laws, including that in regard to sanctuary states. The president is looking at a $1 trillion addition to the economy by cutting workers' payroll taxes as the way to give money back to the workers directly, and none of that money will go to the states. So the actual budget deficit is plus or minus $68 billion. There's also something else. You have to be careful of the words of our legislators. I've seen numerous press releases over the last few days where our legislators are proud of themselves in a bipartisan way almost unanimously, having passed a resolution saying that there needs to be a moratorium on the spending of money for the high-speed rail. And I don't think any of the 22 people on this call would oppose that. I think everyone supports that. And they want a study to see if we should still have the high-speed rail. And we already know what that would look like. And that's okay too. But here's the problem. The resolution is as valuable as the toilet paper at Stater Brothers shelves, because the resolution does nothing other than make requests. It's not a part of the law. But if you look at the budget that these legislators are about to pass, close to $1 billion in subsidies from the carbon tax, from the gas tax, and from other sources illegally are going to be transferred to the high-speed rail system. So if those individuals, legislators who are bragging that they signed on to a resolution to oppose the high-speed rail, you need to question them. If you did that, why aren't you taking out the money from the budget, which is really the action item that we need? And so this is the way legislators operate. They try to make us feel good with resolutions, statements, but you have to watch what they do, not listen to their words. And as the budget passes, the high-speed rail will get another $1 billion, sadly, from the people of California. The budget also includes a great situation where the governor wants $600 million for hotels that he can buy to house the homeless. Now, I just did a story in my newsletter. LA spent in the last 2 years close to LA City and LA County, cumulatively, close to $3 billion on the homeless. $3 billion. And homelessness is up 14% instead. So the more we spend, the more homeless we get. Maybe we're not doing the right things. And it's obvious that when you spend that much money and you're still falling backwards and still having a higher number, 14% of homeless, you're not answering the problem. Down in San Diego, we thought about buying hotels, and the hotels they wanted to buy there were so bad, so roach infested, that the health department wouldn't allow the sale of those hotels. And that's what the governor and the mayor of San Diego wanted to do. Literally, what the $600 million is to bail out failing motels around the state, giving it to the state, paying off these owners so they're out from under a facility that needs tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands to refurbish, and the state's going to bail them out. Then they're going to put them into homes. 2 months ago, the governor set up 15,000 hotel rooms around the state for the homeless. Only 9,000, a little more than 9,000, have been filled. So if there was a great need for $600 million to buy hotels to house the homeless, how come with the first 15,000 hotel rooms, only 9,000 have been filled? But the best thing is if you want to really live the good life, and I know all of us like to take vacations, I think all of us after this should drive up to San Francisco, proclaim to the government that we are homeless, and they will put you up at the Ritz-Carlton with 3 meals a day at the Ritz-Carlton. But the better news is they will also provide you, since you're homeless, with marijuana, drugs, and alcohol, along with your 3 meals a day. Now that's a vacation at taxpayer expense up in San Francisco. They can't fill all of their rooms that they have in that city, even though they're doing such a wonderful job of providing services and products for the homeless. We are in a time where the budget is being used not for the purpose of solving problems, of helping people, but for the special interests. watch as they change the budget. And by the way, even though the budget will be passed by June 15th and by constitutional response, the governor will sign the budget by June 30th, midnight June 30th. There's going to be a session of the legislature in August in which they are going to actually pass another budget to supplement this budget once they know how much the amount of revenues are and how much they want to spend. It is my belief that the state budget is going to have less money for law enforcement. In fact, Governor Newsom's revised budget statewide cuts 24%. He's defunding law enforcement in the state of California by 24%. That's the number from last week. Everything always changes at the last minute. And by the way, if you think the budget is going to pass, when you read the budget on Tuesday morning and think that's the budget that's going to the governor, that's another one of the hoaxes of the system. There are 70 bills that are called trailer bills that have been introduced in regard to the budget, and all of them are blank. 70 bills blank. And what they do is they get a number, AB such and such or SB such and such, and they will fill it in after the budget's done. So you really don't know what the budget's going to look like until those bills are passed. Then we'll have an idea what the budget spending is, which brings us to the crisis at hand. And the crisis is we are a one-party state. And as such, the Republican Party is irrelevant in the state legislature. We know that. We have some great people. My favorite person, of course, is your state senator, Mike Morrell. He and I have been friends for many years. I've worked on his campaigns several times. And he is one of the true patriots in the legislature. But that being said, he's not listened to anymore because he's Republican. On the negotiations for the budget, for the first time in history, the Republican Party was not allowed at the negotiating table. Only Democrats negotiated the budget. That's how irrelevant we are. As I've said the last couple of years, the 2020 election is going to be the last election where the Republican Party is relevant in the state of California. There are 7 candidates for Congress, for instance, Greg Rath, Young Kim, Brian Mayotte, David Valadao. And David Valadao is the only Republican that is winning his race. Michelle Steele, all these other races, including Mike Garcia, who just won his seat. Every Republican running in the 7 targeted seats, except for Valadao, everyone is behind by a minimum of 8 points already. And the reason for that is the voting electorate will be much different in November than it was in the May 12th primary. In November, in the primary, there was plus or minus 40% turnout. The turnout for the presidential election will be a minimum of 75%. And that's where we change. If I was a person, I never bought a lottery ticket. But if I was a person, I would tell you we will lose 2 to 3 seats and 2 to 3 state Senate seats. And the only congressional seat that we will take back is that of the Central Valley. The rest of the ballot, and go into those things in Q&A. But the bigger issue for us as a state is the initiatives that are going to be on the ballot. We're going to have another $5 billion measure for stem cells. They several years ago they passed $5 billion, and the only thing they could show for the $5 billion is a headquarters and staff. Zero showing of any scientific improvements, because most of the money was spent on administration, staff, etc., and not on the science. Second, there's going to be a major issue between art clubs, racetracks, and casinos. Indian casinos is going to be sports betting. That's what we are. One of the things they're going to allow, if this passes, is online betting. For sports. So if you want to bet on a Dodger game or on a Rams game, you can do so online through one of these casinos. And there's a big push on that. There's also a change in the law in regard to the number of slot machines Indian casinos have. It's going to be a very excessive fight between the racetracks who want to keep the betting on site versus the casinos who want to take over the betting. So that's a big one. And of course, the major one for all of us is the split roll, where they want to amend Prop 13 to allow the assessment of real property, of commercial industrial property every 3 years rather than changes hands. And of course, the state assessors association came out against it. The reason that they have is because they say they can't do the job that's being requested. Even if they could hire the people, it takes 5 years to train somebody to do that type of assessment. And so we're in trouble. A $12.5 billion transfer of funds from industrial and commercial property government, which means that as the taxes go up, less people are hired, and government gets lose for everybody. So you have the split roll as a problem. And then, of course, they want to bring back the issue of affirmative action. Now, remember what affirmative action is that you're no longer allowed to hire employees by qualifications and experience. You're no longer allowed to enroll students in colleges based on abilities, nor can you give out contracts based on experience and abilities. You have to give out the contracts based on race and based on gender. That is called racism. And that's what they want to take us back to. Years ago, you'll remember the fight on Proposition 209 to stop it. That is it was passed by the people. We don't want discrimination. And it's so amazing. At the time that they are telling us that they want equality in the state, they want to pass a measure by initiative that takes away equality in the state, making everyone equal. It literally makes some people more equal than others, kind of like the book Animal Farm. So there's one other measure. There are two other measures on the ballot that you should be aware of. One is, I think it's called ACA 25. And this is the bill that allows the legislators to stay home, never go to Sacramento, and have somebody else vote for you. So you can vote for a candidate for assembly, get them elected from San Bernardino, but the person voting your vote is actually from Chico or from Sacramento, somebody you never heard of, you can't vote against and throw out of office. They will be voting on your behalf. So they're allowing a proxy voting via ACA 25, which is going to be on the November ballot. If that's not bad enough, there's another section to the initiative that allows for, in the case of an emergency in any one of the 58 counties, so say Modoc County had a fire, and rightfully the supervisors asked the governor to declare a state of emergency in Modoc County. which is one of the tiniest counties in the state. Once he declares a emergency in Modoc County, it's now considered a state emergency, and the Speaker of the Assembly, the President of the State Senate, is allowed to hold all hearings in private, secret from the public, pass legislation without telling us that they're passing the legislation, what's in the legislation, or allow for any public discussion, and then after the fact tell us what they did. In other words, a star chamber, kind of like the Politburo in Russia. The public has no input, and that's ends democracy in the state of California, because there's always some county that's going to be in an emergency. Here in Ventura County, where I live, in the far reaches of our county, there are two major fires going on right now. Not much population involved in the area, and the Board of Supervisors have sent a request to the governor to declare a state of emergency in Ventura County. Once that's done, if ACA 25 was in place, we would then have secrecy on the budget process. They could do everything in secret. They could do whatever they want in regard to law enforcement, education, etc., all in secret, with us not being able to attend public hearings, told there are any hearings. They could just do the job. That may be the most undemocratic legislation in the history of California, which is known for the recall referendum, which is important to our democracy, which leads me into the recall of Governor Newsom. For the first time, there is an organized, and it looks like it'll be well-financed, effort to recall Governor Newsom. When the other two programs came about, Aaron Cruz and Dr. Veltmeyer's, there was no pandemic. The governor had not repealed the Constitution. He did not close the churches. He didn't close our restaurants and barbershops. He hadn't done any of that. Now there are upwards of 4 million Californians out of work because of his orders. And so people are angry. And so the Recall Gavin Newsom campaign got started. And the Thursday night, the Secretary of State finally released the petition to go on the streets. And this is probably, and I've been doing this politics since 1960. I worked on gathering signatures with the state organization for Prop 13, what became Prop 13, with Howard Jarvis and his people in 1977, 78, to get that on the June 78 ballot. And so I understand the process. So if you want to get a petition, you don't have to write to me or to anybody else. You don't have to wait to go to Los Angeles to pick up petitions. Go to recallgavin2020.com. recallgavin2020.com. And you can download and print the petition. And the question some people have, well, you know, the last petitions were 8.5 by 14, and none of us have legal size paper in our homes. And I would gather no one on this call has legal size paper. So what we've done, with the permission of the Secretary of State, we have two forms. One is 8.5 by 11, which is the normal size. And based on that, you can get 5 signatures per petition. Or if you want to use the legal size, 8.5 by 14, you can get 10 signatures per petition, both of which have been authorized by the Secretary of State. And you can download as many of these petitions as you want, and you can do it right after this call, and you can start gathering petitions. You don't have to wait to find somebody that has them. At the bottom of the petition, there is an address where the petitions are to be sent. And it's up in the Sacramento area. We've set up a warehouse, and we have 70 people who have volunteered in that area to do the collection, counting, and verification of the signatures. So it's a well-organized thing. Now, that's one part of it. The second part, and I am, a full disclosure, I'm the chief consultant for the Recall Newsom 2020 campaign. Then on the other hand, we also have calrevival.com, calrevival.com. You can also get the petition from that site, the same petition you get at the Recall Gavin 2020 site. The difference is Cal Revival is the political action committee set up by Tom Del Beccaro, myself, Tony Strickland, and a couple of other people for the purpose of raising major donor dollars for this, as well as online donations. Sometime by the end of this week, we should have requests going nationwide for people in Iowa, Kansas, Idaho, Florida to donate to the recall of Newsom. And you may ask, well, why would people in other states care who our governor is? And they do care because they know that California laws sometimes sneak in and bleed over into their states. So if they could help get rid of Newsom, it would send a message to the regressives. And notice I don't use the term progressive. These people are not progressive. They are regressive. They want us to go back into feudal days. They're anti-democratic. They're anti-Republican, both with a small r, and they are against the freedoms that we have in our Constitution. These people, the Democratic Party now wants to become feudal lords, not only nationwide. So we think we're going to raise regular money outside the state to save the state of California from the Supreme League. So the two efforts of the recall are recall2020.com and calrevival.com. So those are the two efforts that we have. This is a really strange time that we're in. I'm going to end with a quick story, and then I'll answer questions. In my Monday's newsletter, I'm going to do a story about the Writers Guild of America that is a part of the AFL-CIO. The Writers Guild are the people who get us all the TV shows and movies, the hate movies that hate freedom and the rights of free speech, the rights of religion. They love killing babies, and that's the Writers Guild. It seems that the Writers Guild of America, East Coast Division, has sent a letter to the AFL-CIO demanding that police unions be kicked out of the AFL-CIO because they're murderers. And they don't want murderers as part of their union. And so now even the union movement is getting into this. You all know about the Paw Patrol, which is a cartoon. It was mentioned by Tony that I have grandkids. I have a 3- and 4-year-old grandsons, and both of them love Paw Patrol. That's it seems to be their favorite TV show. And what is it about for those of us who don't watch it? It's about some cats who are dressed up as cops who do good deeds. And the reason the Black Lives Matter group wants Paw Patrol taken off the air is they don't want, this is from their press release, they don't want police to look good. They're also pressing to get rid of all those TV shows about police officers on TV, Chicago PD, Law and Order, and all of those venues that show police doing police work. They've already gotten rid of 2 shows, And we are in an era of censorship. It used to be that the censorship is burning of books. Now the censorship is in the media itself. And it's funny, I just went, as you all know, HBO is taking Gone with the Wind off of their circulation. They're not going to allow you to see Gone with the Wind. So I just went for my wife wanted to look at Amazon.com. So I looked at their website for something, and at the very top left of their website, they have a big box showing Black Lives Matter, what we're doing about it, which is their right to do. But then they're also selling a T-shirt that says Blue Lives Murder. I cannot imagine any law enforcement official wanting to buy from Amazon if that's the type of organization Amazon is. That they think that selling T-shirts, Blue Lives Murder, is a good thing. And then trying to claim that all white people, this is what Amazon does, they agree that there's systemic inherent racism in America. Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, is white. Therefore, he must be racist and he must be eliminated by his own terms of Amazon. That's the type of world we're living in. I'll close with a quote from Harry Truman. I don't give them hell. I just tell the truth, and they think it's hell. And now's the time for us to be told the truth about what's going on in California and America. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. What seems to be going on?
I'm wondering if you might have a write-up on all those points you made, so that we can, some of what you said wasn't coming through, and I'd like to, maybe do some more reading on some of the stuff you shared.
I would be happy to do a summary of this. I will send the summary to Tony, and then Tony can, if you would, distribute it to the Tea Party. Is that okay, Tony?
That would be fine. We can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick question, Steve, on the petition. What is the timeline on the petition?
We have to, the deadline is 160 days. That's November 17th, to be specific. I will tell you that over this weekend, we are sending out 3.5 to 4 million emails to California voters. We have 70 different Facebook pages that have agreed to help us with social messaging to get people to sign the petition through Facebook. And we have Epic Times yesterday published a op-ed piece by Tom Del Beccaro. It was in my newsletter today. Tom and I are going on a series of radio shows statewide this week, promoting Recall Gavin 2020 and calrevival.com. So there's a lot of things going on. I will also tell you, one of the people who is on board with this is Stephen Moore, the economist that we see on Fox News. He is on board with this. So there's just a lot of effort gone into this one. It's a different type of effort. And as I said before, I'm the chief consultant for the recall effort. And I'm doing that as a volunteer. All the people involved in both Cal Revival as well as Recall Gavin 2020 were volunteers. But most of us have had a great deal of experience in the political field in campaigns. But we think that the state is so important, that we want one more try to save it.
So if anybody else has questions for Steve, just unmute yourself and ask.
I
I do.
do.
I have a quick question, Tony. Okay, on this, Steve, do we have to be extremely careful like the last time about any kind of a tail for a J or a G going beyond the bottom line or the sideline? Is that, so I was putting sticky notes all around and having them re-signed because somebody told me any area where you went outside the line was invalidate the entire petition and then have to go out and get everybody to sign all over.
Totally untrue.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. This is Gina. I have a question, Steve. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Gina, how you doing?
Really good, thank you. Two questions. So we should expect a election maybe in February once we get all the signatures, and then aside from that, I'm going to need maybe 300 petitions, maybe 400 petitions, because we're doing it at my church. So, who do I contact for that?
Send me a note and I'll get those to you.
Okay.
Now, let me answer the first part of your question, though. You asked about the timeline. As I answered to Tony, the 160 days ends at November 17th. And my presumption is we will have those signatures prior to that, but let's use November 17th as the date. The Registrar of Voters have 30 days in which to certify county by county, verify, I should say, the number of signatures that are good in each county. That is then reported to the Secretary of State, who has another 30 days. Now you're into January, and sometime in January, the Secretary of State will announce that the signature, enough verified signatures have been collected to force a recall, and he has no choice. The only choice is, and because the governor is the one being recalled, normally the governor would set the date of the recall, but because the governor is the one being recalled, the Attorney General will set the date of the recall, but the date is in the law that from the date of verification to the date of the election should be no less than 60 days and no more than 90 days. So there's not much weasel room for the Attorney General in setting that date. So we're actually looking for an April or a May special election. Now, let me remind everybody how that special election goes, because some people are confused. On the special election ballot, there'll be two questions. The first question is going to be, shall Gavin Newsom be recalled from office, yes or no? The second question is going to be, if Gavin Newsom is recalled from office, who shall replace him? Now, if you remember from the 2003 special election, there were 132 candidates to replace Gray Davis. And we also know that under the law, there's no runoff like the top two. That is a plurality that wins a special election in a recall. And so if the governor is recalled, there will be a plurality that elects the new governor. Some people have asked, well, doesn't the lieutenant governor automatically become governor? The answer is no. We get to vote again for governor under those circumstances with two votes. Shall he be recalled, yes or no? And second, if recalled, who replaces?
Okay, we had one question in the chat. How many signatures are required?
I'll round off the number. 1.5 million are required. We're going after our budget, and our efforts are based on getting 2.1 million. And Gina brings up a very good point. The way we're going to get signatures, yes, we're going to go to Target and Walmart and those places to get signatures. But the best places to get signatures are at the churches, because the churches have been harmed the most in the state. The other places we're going to, I have a friend today who lives in the Marina Del Rey area, and I will admit the guy likes to drink. And so he's going to his favorite bars in Marina Del Rey, get signatures on the petition from the owners and workers at the bar and the customers, since the bars are now kind of open. We're also going to barber shops, hair salons, and next Friday, we're going to be able to go to nail shops. Nail shops will be open in most of the state. So we're going to all those businesses that have been massacred by the policies of the governor, and we want these people to thank him. My friend went to a bar last night and called me. He says he got signatures on two petitions, 5 each. So he got 10 signatures, and the bar owner said, you know, I'm a Democrat, but he destroyed my business, and I don't like these recalls, but we need to get rid of Newsom because he's hurt all of us. And so this is not a Republican effort. It's not a Democrat effort. It's a California effort. It wasn't Republicans that lost their jobs. It wasn't Democrats that lost their businesses. It was Californians that lost it. So we're not making this into a Republican or a Democrat effort. We're making it into a California effort.
So a couple of the things that came up in the chat. One had asked about if we can obtain signatures in multiple counties, and from doing petitions, I know you can collect them from whatever county, just each sheet can only contain that particular county. And then the other one was if we have a good candidate ready to run.
Okay, the first part, and I'll get to the second one, but the first part is, you're right, especially those who live near the borders of, if you go to a Walmart in Simi Valley, you'll have about 15 to 20% of the customers come from LA County. They like to shop here because our sales tax is like 4% lower than LA County sales tax. And so we have people from the San Fernando Valley come here, yes. So you can do a petition, but you have to separate it by county. The second part is the more interesting one. The mistake made in 2003 was that we allowed Arnold Schwarzenegger to divide and buy the conservative movement. Literally bought conservative leaders and organizations by claiming he was a conservative. Well, by Vladimir Putin standards, maybe, but not by American standards. And so we got hoodwinked. Then Tom McClintock got in the race. And the sad part is he could have won if he got into the race early in 2003. But by the time he got into the race, the Democrats had already, the Schwarzenegger people had already co-opted the conservative movement. And so there wasn't much left except those who were true diehard conservatives. This time is different. Without going into a lot of details, conservative organizations are having a meeting the weekend of September 4th and 5th in Fresno, called a California Conservative Convention. And all the major groups and minor groups, and who am I to say what's major and minor, but all the major conservative leaders are going to, and activists are going to be meeting in Fresno, and we are forming a confederation of conservatives so that we don't get hoodwinked again for this, so that when it comes time to pick a candidate early, we'll be able to do it. There have been lots of names suggested. Somebody I noticed suggested Larry Elder. His name has been suggested. A TV personality by the name of Mike Rowe, who you may see on the Discovery Channel. His name has been suggested. Peter Thiel, who's a libertarian Republican, who's a multi-billionaire, one of the founders of PayPal. and other major tech firms. If you remember, he spoke for Trump at the Republican convention in 2016 and continues to be the major spokesman for him in Silicon Valley. There have been lots of names suggested. We'll have to see over the summer who gets serious about this. I will tell you, there are 3 people who are already planning to run for governor in 2022 on the Republican side.
Who are they?
The Socialist Republican mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer. I'm just giving you the names, not making a value judgment. John Cox, and both Cox and Faulconer have not decided whether they're going to run as Republicans or NPP in 2022. And then you have former Congressman from Sacramento area, Doug Ducey. And you may be receiving emails from him. He's formed an organization already called California Forward, taking on the governor. And so those are the 3 people who are now seriously looking at running for governor. And of course, there'll be a lot more names thrown out as possibilities. There are a lot of good people out there, but it's going to be a matter of raising the money. And that's going to be what counts. But that's where we are on finding a candidate. But you're right, we do need to unify behind one candidate so we don't have a Schwarzenegger coming in behind us based on our efforts.
Question, why would John Cox decide not to run as a Republican? I mean, I know we're outnumbered, but what's his strategy? What is he saying?
Have you know he has an organization called Change CA, and that Change CA is strictly NPP, and he's trying to organize and get a database of NPPs that would vote conservative. And that tells me that he's greatly interested in the NPP crowd.
What's NPP?
A nonpartisan party. It used to be called decline to, we used to call it decline to state, but with the top 2, they changed the term from decline to state to NPP.
I think it's no party preference, isn't it?
No party preference, I'm sorry, right.
I'll take a question here while there's a moment of silence.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Very good. Got up fairly recently, so I just have I turned off my video just to spare everyone.
I recognize the voice.
Yes. the latest PPIC poll that came out showed Gavin Newsom at 66% approval. And you may quibble, okay, maybe it's really not that high, okay, but he's not Gray Davis in Gray Davis's situation. What's the thinking in launching a new recall and throwing in large amounts of volunteer time to collect a humongous number of signatures, which may or may not be possible, to then go up against a governor that, despite everything that's going on in California, has a very high approval rating?
Well, actually, there is a commonality between Gray Davis and Gavin Newsom. If you remember, there were 2 major issues behind the recall of Gray Davis. One was his doubling of the gas tax, and the second was his secret oil contracts. Now, Governor Newsom has signed AB 5, which is going to be on the ballot for repeal, or most of it, for repeal. And there's hundreds of thousands of people being thrown out of work because of that, on one side. But on the corruption side, he has signed over 400 no-bid contracts that nobody has seen, the legislature is not allowed to see, the public is not allowed to see, but we do know enough about 3 of them, and those 400 contracts, over 400, equal to $4 billion or more. We're not sure because he won't tell us. And one of those contracts was for $1 billion to a firm controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Another was an $800 million contract to to Mercury Strategies. And the Mercury Strategies is a PR firm, a lobbyist firm, and the Sacramento office of that firm is run by Fabian Nunez, who's the former Speaker of the Assembly, obviously a leading Democrat. Then the third one was a $457 million contract to two political operatives, John Thomas and one other person whose name escapes me. And they formed a company. 3 days after they opened the bank account of that company, they got a $457 million contract with Gavin Newsom, a secret one. No one can see what's in there and how it came about, nor is he telling us how these came about. A total of $2.2 billion for the three contracts, and all for the same item, mass. And it's interesting to note that the $457 million contract was canceled after it was signed because the banker who set up the checking account was shocked to see $457 million show up 3 days after the account opened up and showed up in the account. He called the state controller, who then talked to the governor, and they canceled the contract and took the money back because it was so sleazy. So I think we're going to see a lot of corruption in that 400. And the state legislature, even the Democrats, have been demanding hearings on all of these. And the Legislative Analyst's Office is also looking for details of the contracts, as is the Auditor's Office of the state of California. And the governor has not been forthcoming. So, Greg, I do believe there's going to be a lot of discussion about the corruption of Newsom using this pandemic to help his friends.
Any other questions?
I do. So the
Okay.
people that are going to actually run, they really don't have much time to campaign. Is that correct?
I will give you the words of Mark Muser, who's as you all know, the attorney, who's been suing, has 14 lawsuits so far against Gavin Newsom, maybe more. That was last week's total. And he's been pretty good help. He's been very good helping us. And he was asked that very same question. The technicality is on filing. Based on how, if the Attorney General calls the election within, on the 60 days, as I explained before, the 60 to 90 days, if he calls the election for 60 days from date of verification, candidates will have 1 day to file for office. If he does it for 90 days from verification, the candidates will have 90 days. What will happen in reality is, as we show our numbers getting closer to the 1.5 million needed that are verified, and the 2.1 million that we are going to collect, once we get closer to that, you will then see candidates beginning the process of forming committees and getting work. I will tell you, I have been contacted by several people who are considering running, people who want to get behind candidates, and those who are looking for to donate. One of the most interesting thing is that there are major corporations in the state of California that have been harmed dramatically by the governor's actions in one way or the other, that are waiting to go behind a candidate to make sure that Newsom is thrown out of office. And some of those corporations are going to help finance the recall. And so there's a lot of anger in the state. And while Greg says correctly that PPIC poll shows 67%, there is a great anger. And as people settle into the fact that they've been had, let's see, I can't go to Gina's church to hear Pastor Hibbs, but I can go to a demonstration of 10,000 people closing down a community, looting buildings and stores, and no one's going to say anything. So as this sinks into folks are going to start realizing that our very freedoms have been taken away from us. And I think as people get angry, that number is going to go down dramatically. And we only need to have 1.5 million good signatures. And by the time we get to an election, the anger will be there to get rid of the governor.
Steve, what was that date for Fresno that you mentioned?
September 4th and 5th.
Okay.
So hopefully, once he does get recalled, it throws a dent in his presidential aspirations.
It would kill his presidential aspirations, but that's not our consideration. But it does kill his, he's been moving as far left as possible to be a regressive, trying to go to that wing of the Democrat Party, which has taken over the Democrat Party. I mean, poor Joe Biden doesn't even know what his position is on issues. He just listens to whatever he's told by the progressives, and that's his position. He is now almost to the left of Bernie Sanders. And the fun part is, how are the progressives going to support Joe Biden when they want to defund police, when the Joe Biden plan is to give $300 million more to the police from the federal government and takes away nothing from them? How are they going to be supportive of Biden when he does that, even though at the same time he's calling for the so-called reforms?
If you don't mind, I'm on the outside looking in here, but yet I have about 90, let's call it 90% of my business is still in California. I'm talking to my clients, and what Greg was talking about, I'm kind of dovetailing on here. My clients are saying how much they love how Gavin Newsom protected them during this COVID virus thing, and how he really stepped up to take care of them. What you're saying, Steve, to us resonates common sense and logic. The problem is I'm not seeing a lot of that out there right now. And look, I'm praying for you guys big time. You have no idea. Prescott Valley right now is blowing up with Californians coming in. Yavapai County is number 5 in the nation with Californians coming in. We just had a whole bunch of people from Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills move in right down the road, and we got together with them. It was nice to see familiar faces. I'm praying for California, but I don't know if the common sense that you're talking about is resonating right now. I just don't hear it.
Well, I don't know about your customers. I do know about their customers, and their customers are out of jobs. They've been limited in their freedoms, free speech, free assembly, their right to go to church. This attack on the police that's going on that the governor has not stopped. All of this is getting the grassroots people angry. The other part of these polling, and we found out in 2016 that those people who supported Trump were scared to death, bullied into being silent and not responding to polls because they were afraid of being targeted. We know that major donors to the Trump campaign in 2016 were targeted, and executives who donated to Trump actually lost their jobs. So people are very hesitant to say anything negative against the establishment like Gavin Newsom. I do believe we have a strong silent majority. And that was found out in 2016. And I think I know we're going to find out the same in 220. That the people are scared to be truthful because if you support the cops or support Trump, you'll be targeted. So just keep your mouth shut. You could sign the petition and that'll be the end of it. And I do believe that a lot of people are angry. The hundreds of thousands who have lost their jobs from AB 5, they're not going to be happy with Trump. They may be customers of your customers, but they're not friends with the governor.
Are there enough of them that are unhappy?
Hundreds of thousands lost their jobs because of him. That doesn't make people happy that they lost their jobs. The higher taxes, when he comes out in favor, the landlords of the state, there's been a moratorium on, just a story about a newsletter I think this morning, there's been a moratorium on evictions and even the collection of rent in many counties. All those people and all their families are now in economic distress because they can't collect rent. And one lady in the story, she's not allowed to collect rent until sometime in December. But by January 1st, she has to spend $60,000 to do a retrofitting of her buildings, and she doesn't have the money without going into her retirement fund to pay for it. There are a lot of angry people out there, just not as viewable as the local news would show us. The local news doesn't show us that. The polling doesn't show us the people who are scared, who want to have a change. So again, I just think there are more than enough people to get this on the ballot. And then as the corruption comes out, more people will be just angry at how poorly done. Look, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, these states were late to closing, early to open, and they're doing significantly better than California. And people know that. Every person who wants to leave California is going to sign this before they leave because they understand how bad California is. California Globe has a story today about the out-migration from California. And it's a significant story. I urge you to read it. It'll be in my newsletter on Monday. But it's a significant story. It's a good story for us to be shown how people are so angry that they're living. You just mentioned how many people from your Calvary Chapel have moved into Prescott, how other Californians are moving into Arizona and to other states. We all know our good friend Neil is now in Texas. And so we have so many people who are left, a lot of people who are looking to leave. And those are the people who are going to sign this initiative, this petition to recall.
Will there be a problem, and how do you deal with it, of getting the county registrars, staff, which are virtually all Democrats, to honestly process the signatures? They didn't do that for the co-ed bathroom bill that some years ago, and that's still in court. I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years after the fact. And I heard a lot of the reports from the first recall of Gavin Newsom that there was the same thing, is the county registrars just weren't processing the signatures. And what do you plan to do about that?
Well, we have a series of attorneys who are helping us on that part of it as well. And they're not afraid of lawsuits. We're not afraid of suing and asking for removal of ROVs for corruption if they don't do it. And not removal from the state by the state courts, but by the federal courts. That our court system and our justice system and our election system is so corrupted, only the federal government can take it over. Which, by the way, forgetting the recall, I think needs to be done anyway. We haven't had an honest election in the state of California in years. The DMV announced they had, I believe it was 153,000 people that they registered in error. There's no indication the Secretary of State or the ROVs took a single one of those 153,000 off the voting rolls. There's a court order by a federal judge for LA County to get rid of 1.5 million from the voting rolls, and the Secretary of State has been ordered to take 1.5 million from the 57 other counties, and as best could be told, neither one of them have done that. And so we have 3 million illegal voters on our rolls, and literally, and there's a lawsuit showing that the ROV and the Secretary of State are in contempt of court by not doing their job. And the next step is asking for a federal takeover of our elections because of the corruption.
Okay, any other questions before
Yes,
we move?
I see an elephant in the room. I just mentioned it and no one replied to that. Two things. One, the left, I've talked to some, are just so angry about Trump. They don't see anything else on the other side but Trump. So we are the same as Trump. Now, I don't know that that can be fixed. I don't care that it's fixed because I solidly support our president. But the other thing that really confused me after the last attempt to run a presidential candidate, a governor candidate for California, was why were we co-opted by the president? And can we make sure that that doesn't happen this time? Is there any way we can get a liaison with his people to let him know that there's a group of us that strongly are going to support a candidate to run in place of Newsom? So that he doesn't co-opt us again?
Yeah, the story of how John Cox, who voted for Gary Johnson for president, 2016, getting the Trump endorsement for governor, was a backroom deal by friends. And I think the second term of Trump is going to be much different than the first term. The first term, he gave away a lot of those deals. This time, I think he's going to be Trump, and he's not going to do any of those weasel deals again. But we do have people who are going to be going to the appropriate folks in the White House to explain why he should either stay out of the race or elect a real Trump Republican as governor. But that is a concern, and we are going to have to deal with it. But that's separate from the recall itself. But it's an important part of it because the outcome is we don't want another Schwarzenegger.
Right.
By how many votes did we miss the last recall? How short did we come?
Oh, we didn't even come close. The total submitted were 300,000, and they needed 1.5 million. But the difference, of course, is they didn't have the organization. The other part is they didn't start organizing until after the initiative had been approved by the Secretary of State. We've been working on the organization for 2 months, and I'm now building it out. It'll be completed by the end of this week, and it's just an important effort. And but we're way ahead organizationally than the Cruz or the Veltmeyer operation ever was. And the fact that we've organized 70 different major Facebook pages to help promote it at the start of the effort, without going into details, I have a conference call tomorrow, a Zoom meeting with the administrators of those Facebook pages tomorrow afternoon. They already have the plan as to what to do, and I won't go into what the plan is, but 70 are on board so far.
Hey, Steve, I'm curious, what do you think about Adam Schiff being reelected? Maxine Waters, she's running against Joe Collins, who's a really solid guy. But Adam Schiff, if you can't beat him right now, I mean, you know what I'm saying? What is your thought about these guys getting kicked out of office finally?
Maxine Waters could die tomorrow, and she'll still be reelected by about 80% of the vote.
You're right.
So Joe Collins, I don't want to go into his background because he is the nominee. And if you read my newsletter prior to the primary, I explained who he really is. But he is the nominee, so I'm going to leave that one alone. The shift race with Eric Early is a much different race. And I think if you had asked that question a month ago, I would have said Eric Early didn't have much of a chance. But in the last 30 days, we've had these riots, protests, demonstrations, anti-police activity, etc. And I think that Eric is well situated to make the case that Adam Schiff is the cause of it and promoter of these anti-democratic activities that are trying to censor America. And I think that he can take advantage of that. And I think that's going to be a significantly close race. And it's one I'm working with Eric already as a volunteer. And he has a good team around him. He knows what he's doing. And so I think Eric has a great shot at, in a surprise, defeating him. Now, let me make a prediction on an election on Tuesday that, even though it's in New York, affects us here in California. In 2018, AOC defeated the third highest Democrat in the House of Representatives, Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley was as left-wing as they come, but he was white. And so they got rid of him. On the Tuesday election, there is a candidate, there's a congressman by name of Elliot Engel, who Ro Khanani is his idol. They vote the same. He's a very strong regressive, but he is white. The Democrats have a candidate, the progressives, they call themselves, have a candidate called Bowman, who's raised a lot of money, has Bernie Sanders support and AOC support. And if I was a betting person, I would say Bowman defeats Engel. Why is that important? Literally, the progressives are getting rid of the white people from their party. That's really what their goal is. If you look up in the 12th district, I think it's the 12th, Nancy Pelosi's district, it's not a Republican running against her, but it is a progressive running against her who got somewhere around 30% of the vote in the primary in her district. And even though she's going to win in November, they're making sure that white people, no matter what, those who aren't part of the regressive movement are in Congress. And for us as Republicans and conservatives, it may be counterintuitive, but it's a good thing because those people are so radical, wanting such crazy ideas and promoting them. For instance, saying that looting isn't all bad, it's just an expression of free speech, as one member of Congress said. You know, that type of thing doesn't go well with mainstream, which again says to me we'll get the signatures for the recall as all this comes out. But that election in New York on Tuesday for Elliot Engel is going to be a barometer as to whether or not the progressives have total control of the Democrat Party. And at that point, Joe Biden is dead. Figuratively.
Okay, so if no one else has any other real questions, I think we can just kind of move on a little bit and wrap things up. But if anybody does have something that they still want to ask Steve.
Me.
Go ahead.
Okay, you've got a newsletter coming out on Monday, you said. Can you throw in some of the bullet points as far as the spending, that, you know, those contracts that he signed and stuff like that, so we basically, so I don't have to try to remember all of that.
Oh, I could do that, and it will be, so I don't send anything to Tony. What I will do is that portion where I talk about the budget, the contracts, all of that, I'm going to put as my big story in my Heard on the Tom Toms column, which is at the top of my newsletter, because by then we'll have a good understanding. And just for your information, the newsletter comes out at 3 a.m. every morning. And so the Sunday edition, because it's Sunday, I usually finalize somewhere around 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then post it for it to go live at 3 a.m. Monday morning. But that's a good idea. It'll be a good summary for folks to see where we are on the budget and on the corruption with the over 400 no bids.
And you won't mind if I put that in our newsletter?
Please, as Tony and Wendy know and Greg knows, and maybe some of the others, anything in my newsletter can be republished, period. As long as you give the credit, you link back to it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But
And
aside from that, yes, anything. And there's always articles that you should be sending out to your friends of particular interest. It may not be the whole newsletter some days, but you could forward the whole newsletter to everybody, or you could take out one article that's particular to your area or your political concerns of the moment, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think Wendy dropped the link. For those of you that don't get Steve's newsletter, Wendy put that link for that in the chat, so you can pull that up. So, okay. So what? Anybody else have another question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Donald Trump won in 2016 in large part because he broke up the ice of how people are usually locked into voting. Well, he had many traditional Republican ideas and policies. He did not look like, or maybe looked like, he did not act like or sound like a Republican, a traditional Republican. And that broke through in some of the, particularly in the Midwestern states, and flipped those states. How does a Republican in California put together a program, a persona, a look and sound different to win in California without, I mean, going the Schwarzenegger, Meg Whitman route doesn't work, of course. How does that? How do you navigate that? How do you thread that needle to put together something that's going to win in California?
Well, I'm happy to report, though I can't give you the names, we have 3 nationally known economists that if I gave the names you would know, that are in the process of putting together a policy paper on how to save California economically. And so that's going to be the roadmap for all of this. And they're volunteering their services. And so we're really pleased that we're going to have that. And your question is very good. You know, you really need a contract with America type of thing. You need a policy statement as to where you're going: education, law enforcement, transportation, infrastructure, pensions, which is the major issue in California. And so we have these economists who have done things for other states and nationally are going to do one for the state of California. And that'll be the roadmap for us.
Okay. All right. So I just want to move on here because I know we're already like a little past 11. I do want to say I was, excuse me, I was on the conference call, what was it, last week or so, that Steve did along with Tom Del Beccaro and Mark Moisier on the Gavin recall. And I was excited about it because I felt like maybe this one really did have a chance So when we're able to finally meet in person, we will definitely have those petitions at our meetings so people can take them home. But right now, like he said, they are available for you to download. And there's also a download on there that kind of has the instructions. So if you're not used to collecting signatures, then you can get that and you can fill them out and make sure that you sign as the circulator and mail those in. And just start doing that now. Wendy had mentioned about doing voter registration. So once we're like out there collecting signatures on the petition, it's always a good idea to have voter registration forms on hand for people that aren't registered or that maybe want to switch parties, but especially if they're not registered, because then they can register to vote and sign the petition. A couple of other things that are going to be on the ballot in November. Steve mentioned the split roll, and we will have handouts for that once we start meeting, and we'll probably send some stuff out maybe in the next newsletter about that. The other thing that's really big is keep California safe.
Tony, if you don't mind, I have a 11 o'clock conference call I needed to be on.
Sure.
So I need to cut off here. I want to thank you very much. I'm a couple minutes late for it, but I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Okay. So as I said, the Keep California Safe is something that'll be on the ballot. And the website for that is keepcalsafe.org. And what that does is that gets rid of some of the more damaging parts of Prop 47, 57, AB 109. So it doesn't totally get rid of those, but it's going to make some of those crimes that they made as basically insignificant misdemeanors and make them, once again, a higher penalty on that. So we will be pushing out information on that. That's going to be one that we will definitely be supporting and trying to work on getting people to understand and why they need to vote for that. The elections coming up for local city councils and school boards, the filing period for that is coming up mid-July. So we're going to be looking, once we start seeing who's running, we're going to start vetting candidates and trying to really get some good people running in those areas. That's hard because, you know, but we need some good people. We especially need some good candidates to run in the Chino school district because we do have one person who's not going to be running, which is a Democrat. But we want to make sure that we get a good conservative running and elected because two of the candidates that are on the school board not up for re-election, one of them is claims to be a Republican, but he sides with Democrats all the time, and the other one is definitely a Democrat. So we want to try to do that, get some good people. One thing Steve alluded to, Mark Moisher has like 14 lawsuits against Governor Newsom. And for those of you that are not aware, one of the very first ones that was filed by Mark Moisher and Harmeet Dillon was on behalf of Wendy Gish. And so I want to just give her a couple minutes if she just wants to say a little bit about that lawsuit and where we're at on that.
Okay. Right now it sits at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I believe God has it there, tucked there for a while, for a moment, just because of what John Roberts has done. It has been kind of hairy at the church as far as having news media there, because it's been kind of like a zoo. And you can find those videos on my Facebook page. But it comes down to I will allow no pharaoh, no governor, no county supervisor to step on our constitutional rights that were given to us by God long before the Constitution was even written. I will stand up regardless And I am happy that all the churches decided, the ones that opened, to open. And I appreciate that. But one thing we have to watch about is contact tracing. If you come in contact with COVID and they give you your name, please tell them to go to the court and get a warrant for that, because it's illegal under the Fourth Amendment. So just be aware, and we're going to keep pushing on. The state has already asked us to stop the lawsuit, and I told Harmeet and Mark, no, I was going to continue, because don't ever let a good crisis go to waste to beat back tyranny any day of the week. So we're going to continue. It probably will go to the Supreme Court at this point, and that's one trial I would love to attend.
Me too.
Well, I appreciate that, Wendy, that you stepped up. And for those that aren't aware of exactly what that lawsuit was about, that started in the very beginning when they said churches were closed. And she filed out on behalf of, and with a couple of other pastors, that churches were essential and that they should remain open. And then when we send out our next newsletter, we're going to put a link in for the organization, that are taking donations to help fund these suits. What is that, Wendy?
It's the Center for American Liberties, but the website is libertycenter.org.
Okay, and we'll put a link in that in case anybody is interested in donating to that cause. That just helps cover all the legal fees, because most of this is being done pro bono, and but there are expenses. So let's see, I thought I had another note. So we will, if Steve gets some of that information to me, we will send that out, the little bullet points of what he talked about. We will we'll put in the newsletter probably as it gets later towards summer about the conference that he mentioned in Fresno on September 4th and 5th. And like I said, once we're able to start doing meetings, we will have a lot of these handouts. We'll start walking for candidates when that time comes, because just because of this whole COVID-19 and the shutdown, we cannot let that stop us. We have to be out there campaigning. And I will say that I went to several of the rallies for Open Up California, and there was a lot of people there that were not Republicans, that were not necessarily even conservative. There were Democrats there because they're out of work or their business has been shut down and they're fed up. So I do think that there's a lot of people out there that are not happy with the way things are going in California. And I think that, like Steve said, now is the time to try this recall again. I think it's an opportune time, but it's also a time to really get out there and focus on our candidates that are running for state office, because I know running for Congress, yes, that's an important thing, but that affects the whole U.S. But what we want is we want people in state Senate and state assembly that are conservative, that hold to our values, and that's how we change California. We have to get California back on track. One thing I did read about, I think yesterday, I can't remember, Newsom had done an emergency executive order to allow the counties, registrars, to limit the number of polling places, because he was going to send out the all-mail ballots. And a judge issued a temporary restraining order against Newsom's executive order. So I'm sure Newsom will fight that, but we'll have to see how that actually goes. But maybe that will be not allowed, because the problem when you send out all those mail ballots is, like Steve mentioned, how the DMV erroneously registered people that were not citizens and not allowed to vote. They would get a mail ballot, and probably a lot of the dead people still on the rolls would get those ballots, and who knows what happens with those. So that's definitely an issue of voter integrity. So that's one we'll be closely watching. But right now the judge did issue a temporary restraining order on that. So with that said, our next meeting, I apologize, I don't know what is up with my voice. Our next meeting will be on July 11th. The location is to be determined. I'm not sure if Archibald's will let us back in yet. So we'll have to take a look at if we'll have to decide, when it gets closer, if we want to do another Zoom meeting or temporarily meet somewhere else. I'm not sure. So any questions, anybody?
I would remind everybody that looking longer term, that in large measure what's going on before us is the result of decades of indoctrination and counter-American education going on in the universities and in the government-run schools. And to address to save the country, that needs to be addressed, regardless of what happened, regardless of the shorter term of the election. I mentioned, I think at the Mountain View meeting, we're working with a local church in Redlands, the Ark Church of the Nazarene, to do homeschooling. They're going to be a homeschooling support center, and we're having a conference on June 25th at the church, 6:30 p.m. Our speakers are Rebecca Friedrichs, who, by the way, is on our radio show today at 4 p.m. if you're interested in hearing her, as well as Rebecca Kosis from the Christian Home Educators Association, and Denise Soto from California School Choice, who homeschools her children and is,
I think we just lost Greg.
like what I call the Jedi Master of homeschooling. She has taken all these various resources that are out there for homeschoolers and custom designed.
Yeah, it looks like
a very robust.
We lost Greg. I'm not sure what happened there.
Is anyone hearing me?
One thing that was mentioned in the. Oh, now I can hear you.
Okay, I'm not sure where you lost me. I don't show myself as muted. So, anyways, we're doing a homeschooling conference on June 25th at the Ark Church of the Nazarene in Redlands, and getting children out of the government-run schools is vital to the future of the country. Our speakers are Rebecca Friedrichs, Rebecca Kosis of the Christian Home Educators Association, and Denise Soto from California School Choice, who personally homeschools and is what I call the Jedi Master of homeschooling. She has custom designed an elaborate homeschooling program that she thinks is best for her children. So, if you have children, if you know anybody that has school-age children, this would be a great conference to attend. And maybe you find a church in your neighborhood that would like to do the same type of program, not only at the conference, but also be a support center for homeschoolers.
All right, thanks, Greg.
I'd like to make
I'd
like to make a follow-up comment just to that. I homeschooled my children K through 12. And then they went to university. They just finished graduating from law school, both of my children. And while I understand that, I think that I really support Greg in what he's saying. We need, as long as we can, to revert. Conservatives need to revert to homeschooling if they can. And then the second part of that is that we need to put our children into law school. They are so liberal. Just having been associated with the two law schools of my children, they are so liberal. It's just no wonder our judicial system is like it is in California. It's terrible. Their attitudes are just awful. So, that we should think about that also.
Okay. And I think it was also mentioned in the chat that as far as the judge issuing that temporary restraining order about the mail ballots and such, yes, there is a thing in committee right now that is through the legislative.
I know, but it's like, I see them so much.
Okay. If no one else has any other questions, I am going to turn it over to Tom to close our meeting.
Unmuted. Is that it?
Yep, got it.
This is Carol. We're
Just want to
closing.
say that our venue is open for business, but that doesn't mean that our room is open for taking us in. So we've got a month to go. We've got 4 weeks to look at that and see if we can get back in. I'm sure we'll be letting everybody know about that. I just wanted to add that.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Well, since we've been on here this long, thank you for attending, and keep up, working for the Republic, and keep your eyes focused on God, and we'll get through this and we'll prevail. We'll keep in touch and let you know what our next venue is, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Great meeting.
Yep, absolutely.